Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to part two of chapter 17. We're picking back up, learning about the harlot. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. What are you doing with yourself? And also like and share this out to more people. We want to spread this thing. We're so grateful to put on this walkthrough study, and I'm sure you are just as grateful as us as we learn the mysteries that are hidden in this scroll of mysteries that John wrote. So there's a lot of nuggets in here. And as we continue on, we're going to learn more about the harlot. Now, one of the verses that comes to mind about the harlot recently in my mind was Leviticus chapter 21, verse 9, which it says, "The daughter of any priest, if she profanes herself by playing the harlot, she profanes her father. She disrespects her father, the one above her. And the penalty, it goes on to say, she shall be burned with fire." Now, I just found it interesting that the same end for the harlot in Revelation 17 is she will be burned. So God uses this cleansing fire to completely get rid of her. So it's interesting that that lines up there. God is very consistent. He does not change. He is sovereign over all time, and it's truly amazing what we find in the Bible. Now let us pick back up with verse 9. Hope you enjoy. All right, bringing us to verse 9, which it says, "And here is the matter that requires intellect, wisdom, and understanding. The seven heads are seven mountains that the woman dwells upon. They are the seven kings."
And this is where the mysteries, when you read this in English, you think, okay, well, this is where they're revealing the mysteries. Remember in verse 17:7, it says, and I'm going to explain to you the mysteries of the woman, the woman and the beast. Well, this is where you say, okay, now the mysteries are coming. But that's why I think there's more than meets the eye, because we're going to see something else shortly. And it's all going to make sense as to why we should pay attention to this because of the events that are going on today.
Mm, yeah. Now, comparing it to the English says, which have wisdom, just wisdom. And it's interesting that ours says intellect, wisdom, and understanding. That's expanding more. So that's interesting. We don't usually see an expanded, three types. But we are to get the understanding from this verse, and the explanation goes on to say that the mountains are the seven kings. And, that kind of does away with this concept that people will do this. They'll say, oh, well, the woman, the harlot, well, she sits on seven mountains. So physically, we got to go look for seven mountains. And, people will go to the Vatican. They'll say, well, the Vatican sits in between seven mountains all around it. So that makes her the woman. Well, no, the clarification of understanding says that the seven mountains are seven kings. That's rulers.
Mm.
So that verse doesn't do that. That verse goes on to explain what that verse means about that it's actually kings, people.
Absolutely.
However, if you want to stick to the Vatican thing, I would say, well, what about Mecca? Mecca is a city that's surrounded by seven mountains. So, maybe I go find another city somewhere else that does the same thing. That's my beef. That's my little beef I had to throw out there.
Oh, I also want to mention that the literal translation of this is that the woman he dwells upon.
Mm.
And so we still have more gender problems
Oh.
throughout this chapter. So, and more confusion of what gender they believe they are. So,
Yeah, is that a tail? Don't get lured in by the dress, the flower dress of this he she thing.
no, no, absolutely not.
Mhm. All right, bringing us to verse 10, it says, "But five of these fell, and one is, the second is not yet, but when he comes, it must be for a short time."
Wow.
So there's going to be a shifting of leaders. There's
There
going to
is
be
going to be a
leaders
shifting.
falling and leaders stepping up. That's quite interesting.
Well, it is interesting. Haven't you seen the news about the Pope that is very, very sick?
Mhm.
Is that related to anything? I don't know, but
That's pretty
they
strange.
say, yeah, it is strange because they say he's on his deathbed.
Mhm.
So
What's going to
just
happen when he falls? I know there is this thing called Chrislam, and there is the this push to unite Catholicism with Islam and make this thing called Chrislam. So this like blending religious system. And I find that interesting because Catholic, I don't know if a lot of you might know this because we have a very smart audience, but Catholic means universal.
mhm,
They call themselves the universal church because they universally absorb everything. And you could see that in history. They absorbed all the pagan traditions and just renamed them and said, "Oh, you can keep that little idol. Just call it Jesus or call it Peter and worship it,
mm,
whatever. Call it Mary and worship it." But really, it's a pagan idol that you brought in with you last week.
yeah. And I've also noticed that there's some churches that literally are putting on their sign Universal Church.
Mm,
Because there's even one in San Antonio that says Universal Church.
mm,
So
it's not
yeah, that's
good.
just that. No, it isn't good. No,
No.
we're just gonna blend in with everything. That's just terrible. No, we're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, it seems like, Islam would do something like that because
Mm,
what they do is they agree to things and then they slowly take it over. So
right,
I could see them trying to take over Catholicism. When you stand for everything, you stand for nothing, and that's kind of what the Catholics have done. They
right.
just they just absorb and take up everything. They don't really
Yeah.
have a stance anymore.
Well, because the Christian church looks very much like the Catholic Church.
That's
The
true.
they celebrate the first day of the week, and so it's very, very similar to the Catholic Church. So
They do Easter and they do
they do
Christmas,
Easter, Christmas, that is
which
correct.
doing all these things, the Catholic Church says, well, if you do all these things, then you are part of our system.
Yep,
So,
they did say
yikes.
that.
All right, that brings us to verse 11, which it says, "And the beast that is not is the eighth, for he was one of the seven, but went to Sheol."
Brian, this seems to imply that one of the heads dies,
Mm-hmm.
the one that went to the Sheol, and when it was resurrected, it became the eighth head.
Mm-hmm. Now this makes me think of some historical events. Can I share those real
Oh,
quick,
please
Janice?
do. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's think about empires over time. So in the region in or around Israel, all the powerhouse empires are recorded history. And let's go ahead and count them as we go along. So the first one would be the Egyptian, next one would be the Assyrian, then the third one would be Babylonian, the fourth one Persian, the fifth one Grecian, the sixth one the Roman, which was the time of John. John was under the Roman Empire. A lot of people say, "Oh, the Holy Roman Empire." Well, wait a second. You're forgetting the next empire that took over after the Holy Roman Empire, and that's the Ottoman Empire. That makes the seventh empire in that region. And guess what? The Ottoman Empire is one of the longest lasting empires. I'll share some information here about the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire ruled in Turkey. It was ran out of Turkey, and the Ottoman Empire took over in the 1400s. The Ottoman Empire took over from the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire later, the eastern part, which was the surviving part, was called what we know as the Byzantine Empire, but that was still the Roman Empire. Once the Byzantine Empire collapsed, the Ottoman Empire took over and was ran out of Turkey. It was the one of the longest empires. It started in the mid 1400s. And so the Roman Empire was conquered by the Turks and Islam with the Caliphate, the Ottoman Empire, and it lasted up until 1922. and it encompasses the exact same land. And so if we're calculating this to fit here in this verse, well, the seventh dies and goes to Sheol. Well, the Ottoman Empire collapsed and went away. It's no longer. However, there are a lot of people today that are trying to resurrect the Ottoman Empire. The leader of Turkey, Erdogan, is constantly talking about, I want to create another caliphate. And there's a lot of people and terrorists throughout the Middle East. They're calling for the rebirth of the Ottoman Empire. And they want a caliphate. They want to use the caliphate to conquer the whole planet. That's not my words, that's their words. And so I just think it's interesting that that really fits with history.
It surely does. My goodness.
So my eyes have always been on Turkey and Syria and Babylon for
Mm,
end time stuff. And I am looking for this, one of these beasts to pop up. And, this kind of fits with Daniel and some of the stuff he was seeing
hmm
with his statue. But again, we want to keep our eyes open for all possible options. Maybe this is not right, but, it certainly looks good on paper and matching in history. So we got to keep our eyes on Islam. We got to keep our eyes on all these other options that, could be one of these heads.
Absolutely.
Mhm. All right, verse 12. And the 10 horns that you saw are the 10 kings who have not yet received their kingdoms, but they will rule as kings with the beast for a short time. So now we're talking about horns here, and that the explanation of who are these horns? Well, they're also kings, just like the mountains were kings.
Okay, but these 10 kings have not yet received their kingdoms.
So they're in waiting. So
They're in
these
waiting,
kings or rulers are all sitting around waiting for the beast to take its place,
and
and
then they will rule with
then
them.
they will rule
Okay,
with them as a part of the beast system, but they have not received. So maybe they don't get to receive. Maybe they're just the figureheads that are in waiting and possibly going to get their time, but then the beast has a short time for them.
right. And then that would make a total of what, 17? But there's clearly a difference between the first seven kings and the last 10.
Mhm.
And so why were they described differently? It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I would place these to be real time with the beasts, whereas the
hmm
the mountains could be a stretch over time. If you're using history to apply that in, but maybe it is
hmm
real time also. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, it is interesting.
It makes me think of a global power, and not that they are like a specific king over a nation, but maybe a global community, maybe like a communist type community.
Mm.
I don't know. Interesting.
Well, they probably are clearly collaborative with each other.
Hmm.
Maybe they formed some sort of organization together.
Hmm. All right, moving on to verse 13, and it says, and they have one purpose, and they will give their power and strength to the beast. So, thinking about these seven kings, they don't really have all this rulership. Their time is kind of short, but what they do have is they give over their power. That's the whole purpose, is to surrender all their power, meaning maybe they're ruling over their specific nation or
hmm
region, but they're going to give it over to the power or to the beast, and then the beast will become powerful and strong
Mm,
from this action of these rulers.
absolutely.
Yeah, that to me that sounds like New World Order type stuff,
Well,
Tower of Babel type stuff. Let's
it
all give it the
does, doesn't it?
Nimrod.
But here's where it gets to be more interesting as far as this new world order stuff. And remember when we talked about before, Brian, the grammatical shift that happens with Hebrew over time, that the first temple Hebrew was not the same as the second temple Hebrew, nor is it the same as the late second temple Hebrew, which is also called New Hebrew or Mishnaic Hebrew. And clearly the modern Hebrew is entirely different. And so we do see big differences in grammatical shift. But I do want to point out something that is a grammatical shift, which is more entertaining, but yet may also be another mystery revealed. And so this was actually found by someone that worked on our team many years ago. And she had asked that her name not be revealed. But I do want to point this out because this grammatical shift is actually quite interesting compared to some things that have happened recently or been revealed recently. This word for purpose in Hebrew is makshava. Makshava, it really does mean purpose. And you can see this word is used in the first temple period. And it's used as purpose, as thought, or plan, or device. So it does have this true meaning. So I'm not going to say it doesn't have that meaning. However, that when this young lady, she put this in a modern Hebrew translator, she was intrigued to find that this word means something a little bit different, which actually made me consider the grammatical
What
shift that happens over time.
what did it find, Janice? You got me on this
So
edge of my
I
seat.
I know, right? So when they develop like such as electronics, right? Such as computers, there was this discussion as to what do we name it? What is a computer's purpose but to have thoughts, right? So it's a thinking tool. And in this thinking tool, say they decided to name it Makshev. Makshev is the root of this word, and it actually means computer.
Oh,
And so, because it comes from that root of thought, right? Now, because it comes from that root of thought or plan or device, that now you've got this as a computer. Now, why is this intriguing? Now, if you were to translate this, it says, and they have her one computer would be the literal translation
mm,
because the hey now at the end of the makshava, and then it would be makshava. Now the hey would be a pronominal suffix meaning her, and it's possessive, her computer. Now remember, the woman and the beast are both feminine nouns. And so now they're saying they have her one computer. I find
whoa.
this fascinating because this grammatical shift now makes it seem to imply that there's a her one computer coming up. Now,
Wow.
I saw a Shavuot message. Literally, it's the name of this video on YouTube is Shavuot, and it's from 2022, and it's on TorahFamily.org channel. And Steve Mutria was doing a teaching. He was teaching off-site because it was Shavuot. And the very first 6 minutes or so of this meeting, he says, let me tell you a story about my friend who just returned from Israel. And he was actually literally, his friend was with Netanyahu and other top people within Israel. And he was telling Steve about the Noahide laws and how he really was concerned for his life because he was messianic, wearing zitziot, the zitzit, the strings upon the four corners of the garment. He was wearing them in Israel as a messianic, and they told him that he only could do the Noahide laws. Now, when he went through this tour with Netanyahu and others, he described a computer like none other has been seen before, something that has never been seen before. That all of this plan, this great plan that they're waiting to implement, they're waiting for some great big event to switch all this on. And so I do encourage people to go to YouTube and look up the Shavuot 2022 message by TorahFamily.org and listen to the first few minutes, 5, 6 minutes, 7 minutes of this video, and listen to him tell the story about this computer and their plan about the Noahide laws. But I do find this fascinating that we have her one computer, and of course, the woman and the beast, they're both feminine and they have a computer. Is this, Brian, a greater computer system possibly that's coming out,
Maybe.
such as, 3D dimensional tangible holograms type stuff? It sure seems like
Yeah,
that to me.
my mind is thinking about all these. You could. They're starting to call them tools now, but these AI models that are being used in businesses around the world, people are embracing it. Now, the AI is only as good as your programming and only as good as your library. However, if you could make AI merge with mechanical instruments and mechanical, equipment and bombs and drones and stuff, and you could create, um, a beast-like system. Looking at AI and thinking about this verse that it gives strength and power to the beast. Well,
Hmm.
if I'm playing this out in the future, I could totally see that being the case,
Hmm.
and that this overlap of Hebrew modern term meaning computer, or you could just go ahead and say AI because that's what it is. It's a computer
Well, my concern
software
is,
system.
and you're right about that. I think my concern really is those self-aware artificial intelligence. Those are the ones that are most alarming to me. And then this image that they start worshiping, and that's why I talk about
Mhm.
that this image could easily, through every computer around the world, could produce this maybe 3D type image that people worship. Do you remember, Brian, when we were talking about the mitpalim and the word for praying, and it means they were praying, and it's a hitpael verb form. And this hitpael verb form, you first consider, is this a reflexive or is this a reciprocal event? A reflexive event would be he stationed himself. And a reciprocal event would be there's an action, reaction, there's a, a prayer, then there's an action, and so forth. So there's a reciprocal event. And an example of a reciprocal event is a conversation, a dialogue, right? And so the question I have is this going to be a self aware, her one computer, where it is actually manifesting itself on every device around the world, where they literally have a conversation with this artificial intelligence that gives it power, right? And so their conversation, just literally having a conversation, to me seems to indicate that they're inviting this beast into their home, or this image of this into their home. And so that's just kind of my idea, is that this is a reciprocal. We shouldn't even be having a conversation, at least for safety's sake, with an artificial intelligence, at least a self-aware artificial intelligence. And just to be safe, I don't have any artificial intelligence turned on. I turn everything off, at least as much as I can. But they're downloading it all the computers. So
Yeah. Well,
I don't know, just a thought.
yeah. I mean, to go further with that, if you think about what you give your time to, what you give your energy, your focus, your mindset, what you pour your heart into, or what you spend the most time into, that's what you give your power to. That's what you're giving power to it. So if you spent all your time, watching sports, so maybe that's for some people out there, but it's not for me. If you spend all your time and all your energy, all your mindset, all your heart goes into watching sports, well, in essence, you're connecting with it and you are worshiping it. And so for these people, again, our version in the Cochin says that they are praying to the idol, or the image in the idol. Um, but these people that are communicating with it, if they're spending all their time with it and talking to it and all their intentions, it's in a sense they are at the basic root worshiping it and giving it power. And so this all makes sense to me. I mean, I could see AI being the thing that fits with
Mm-hmm.
giving the beast power if I'm playing it out in 5 years, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
when end times is going to happen. I don't know when it's going to play out, but sure seems like it's pretty close to me.
It does. It seems like we're right on the precipice at that point where things are starting to turn. And I think we'll be turning fairly quickly at this point. But I think we needed to bring this out to the open just because, whether or not it was a fluke, I don't know, but I do think there's enough information that we should at least be cautious that perhaps this was a word that was chosen many generations ago. Because think about it, Jehovah knows everything. He's the one that created the languages, right? He's the one who created time, and he knows what word will transition, will do its grammatical shift, and what it will mean in the modern Hebrew language. So why would he not intentionally use this works to show that she also has one computer? Yes, it's a one purpose. Yes, it's a one device. They have a one plan. But hey, guys, she also has one computer.
Hmm.
Just my 2 cents. I just
Yeah.
thought I would bring that out.
Yeah. And I know some people that are keeping their thumb on the pulse of AI and the stuff they're planning with nuclear reactors and
Mm,
powering AI. It's pretty scary stuff, spooky stuff that its capabilities are just going to get enormous. And the rate of calculating and searching is just going to be unthinkable, the
I agree.
capabilities. And, that's just around the corner, actually, people. So, yikes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, moving on to 14, in which it says, and they will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will prevail over them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him are the chosen and the faithful. So this sounds like Yeshua's coming back down to earth with his faithful chosen people that were on the sea of
Mm,
fire and glasses. And I
it
don't know if this
is.
is a summary of what's going to happen before it happens. But that's definitely the end result.
Right. And then, this is the term that was used in our last chapter about in that day. That day is this great war that's coming. And he's made a terrible mistake to war against Yeshua,
Mhm.
the Lord of Lords and King of Kings, who certainly will defeat him. And
Yeah.
guess what? He's going to be terribly humiliated because the chosen and the faithful will be with him.
hmm It's like the armies are all gathered at Armageddon, which we saw in the previous
Hmm.
chapter. And then you have in this chapter, it's clarifying they try to go to war with the Lamb. They're trying to go to war with God. They're trying to fight against the will of God. And that's an impossible task. And of course, Yeshua comes back. Some people theorize that Yeshua and the chosen and the faithful are going to come down and take the same route of the Exodus, the same path, coming down to Egypt, going to Saudi Arabia, and then coming up and then conquering the land and taking Megiddo, the Valley of Megiddo. I think there are some good arguments for that case. But
Hmm.
here, it's just saying he's coming back. He's going to deal with these people.
Absolutely. And I do think that that's going to be the same route that's taken. I've
Mhm.
told that to friends for a long time. I do think that same route is going to happen.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to verse 15. It says, he said to me, the waters where the harlot lives that I saw are peoples, corporations, and nations. So there's another clarification that
Hmm.
the harlot is alive through the peoples, the corporations, and the nations. So peoples, the individuals giving them powers and money and attention, but the
Hmm.
corporations are in on it. They've signed over to evil, and the nations probably would be the governments that they are in on it too. So everybody is in on uh this system that the harlot is living through.
I actually have this vision of seeing all these corporate logos all over everything, eh, just their Nike logo or whatever it is, and their logos are all over this. So just interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
they're
no,
all involved.
yeah, they're all involved. And now comparing this to the Aramaic and also you can see the scriptures 2009.
Hmm.
Same thing with the King James. You got the multitudes and tongues or crowds and tongues, multitudes and tongues for Aramaic Murdoch there. But we don't have this extra added repeat, essentially. Crowds are people. So
Hmm.
why do I need to say that? Multitudes are people. Why do I? And then tongues. Well, tongues is different languages, but that's also encompassed in nations.
Hmm.
The Cochin is being again tight, compact, and not repeating, whereas the
Hmm.
English is and the Aramaic is also.
I agree. So, what does the Crawford Aramaic have? Does it have tongues as well?
All right, let's check that one.
Oh, there. It does
Sorry,
have. It has tongues, languages.
tongues and
So
languages.
it
Yep.
does. That's right. Well, it matches the Greek.
Hmm. And the Cochin stands alone.
It does stand alone.
Very cool. All right, moving on to verse 16, in which it says, "And the 10 horns that you saw on the beast will hate the harlot and will make a wasteland of her and eat her flesh and burn her with fire."
They're turning on each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're turning on each other. This group of 10 is not liking this harlot.
No. And maybe, if I'm again, I'm trying to, apply Islam as the beast system.
Hmm.
Yeah. Sorry if this is getting old. I'm just saying. Islam has the thing where they'll join their enemies for a little while, and then once they get enough power, they would turn on their enemies. So
And
they're
I do think
friends.
that in some way, I think you're right. In some way, they
Mhm.
will certainly be part of this. And I think that they're going to have their free reign at some point in time and do great destruction around the earth. And I don't think it's going to be a pretty sight.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting to see, this double cross here.
they're
Hey, I'm
double
going to use
crossing,
your power and then I'm going to double cross you.
right?
Now, this destruction, I can only guess, this is going to be a military attack because you got fire and burning her.
Mm,
So that's interesting as well.
absolutely.
All right, moving on to verse 17, and it says, "For Jehovah allowed their hearts to do his will, to give her riches to the beast until she is devastated by the words of Jehovah." So the fact that she is going to rise up and then she's going to be destroyed is all for the purpose of God to use her. And, this is all in God's plan. She
Hmm.
will be destroyed. She's going to get, what she deserves. But in the meantime, the wealth that she accomplishes, which we pointed out in previous verses, is given over to the beast and the beast system. Now,
Hmm.
is that money? Is it gold? Is it technology? Is it all three of those things? I mean,
Possibly all
yeah, is
three.
it? Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But I love to see that Jehovah is the one. This is coming
Mhm.
directly from him. And he's allowing these 10 to do the destruction on her, saying this is his will.
Yeah.
And this is exactly how he operates when someone is out of his will,
Mhm.
that he is the one who will directly release the evil upon the wicked. And so the that they destroy themselves, right? And we have not once, but Jehovah's name is in here twice.
Yeah, that's a good important one. You can see in the English, Scriptures 2009 says Elohim, so they're choosing God. The Aramaic does God, but again, we have twice Jehovah in the same spot where they
Absolutely.
have where they have God. So that's also significant too.
Absolutely. So what does the Crawford Aramaic have? Does it have Jehovah or does it have Elohim?
It has Allah, which is God.
Yep. So they have God twice.
Mm.
And again, so we do see, and I'm glad we did this, Brian, so that we
Mhm.
could show people that it looks just like the Crawford and the Murdoch are both translations from the Greek predominantly, which is interesting. And
Mhm.
so people wouldn't be able to argue this with Revelation anymore because I think it's just proven that it is
Mhm.
very much like the Greek.
Yeah, we did our due diligence. People said, "Well, hey, isn't it from the Aramaic?" Okay,
Hmm.
you claim that. Well, let's put it to the test. We'll show our
Absolutely.
audience that, hey, it differs almost everywhere.
That's right.
When it comes to things that is the Cochin is disagreeing or
Hmm.
differing with the Greek. Well, it's also disagreeing with the Aramaic, and the Aramaic is also matching the Greek, so
Right,
it kind
right.
of ends that story or that theory, rather.
It does end that theory.
All right. And this brings us to the final verse of chapter 17, which it says, "And the woman that you saw is the great city, the kings over all the kings of the earth." So we're getting a clarification. So the woman, not only is she living through the peoples, the corporations, and the nations, she's also a great city, and that all the other kings of the earth is being subject under her at some point. So this is a very powerful city. It's being described as a woman.
It is a very powerful city. And now we've got this very powerful city. The woman now is this great city. And of course, she's involved deeply in the horde. And so you mentioned earlier about the US, they've been paying for this gender reassignment surgeries for these kids around the world. And so that's the reason why many people consider that the United States, which is whose name will not be remembered anymore, is the source of this evil. They're the source of the pharmaceuticals, which we'll be seeing soon, and they're the source of all these wicked things, and that everyone is partaking of. And so that's the reason why it's a good theory that this woman, the great city, could be the United States, who will not be remembered anymore.
Very interesting. Now again, we have to keep in mind all these different possibilities. They
Mm-hmm.
are planning multiple giant megacities in the future. One of them, Janice, you and I were fortunate
Yep,
enough to go drive through as they were constructing it. It's in
absolutely.
Saudi Arabia. It's a
That's
place
right.
called Neom.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't heard of it, you need to go check out Neom projects in Saudi Arabia because there are many different great plans. They're planning to build a mega city that's 33 times the size of New York City. They're going to spend trillions of dollars on it. There is one section where they're like carving out mountains to build this giant line city
Mm-hmm.
that's like 8 stories tall and 8 stories deep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's glass mirrored and it's going to be future teched out to the maximum. AI things everywhere, facial recognition, solar streets, crazy plans, but you
And
know,
a little too close to Mount Sinai, if you
right?
ask
Little,
me.
yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely too close to the real Mount Sinai.
That's right.
But is this one of those great cities that
That's a
is
good
possibly the
question.
harlot? Or maybe
That's
there's
a good
other ones
question.
that's going to pop up similar to this one.
And we don't
We
know. That
don't
may
know.
be true.
Yeah, but we need to keep our eyes open.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Well, with that said, I would like to close out this chapter with a quote. I came across this quote recently. I'm not too sure about this person, but this is Pablo Neruda, and he said, "All empires are created of blood and fire, and their end is ashes." And so that makes me think of this great city and how it's going to end with fire and ashes, which we saw in the previous verse 17. And it's so true. I mean, that's why we need a city built by God and not of human hands, which is New Jerusalem. We look forward to that day. We'll get to that chapter at some point in the walkthrough study. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was pretty wild. We had some gender confusion and some mysteries. We had some lilies that weren't really lilies. What in the world? Okay. But hey, I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough study. I hope we've stirred up some of your thinking. Again, we're talking about future prophecy things that we don't, I don't know the future. You don't know the future. It's just stuff we have to keep on the table for all possible scenarios and to keep our eyes opened. My people perish for lack of knowledge. We got to know about these things so we don't get caught up in it and be on the wrong side and do the wrong thing. We have to seek God's face and have Him protect us by doing what's right and being knowledgeable. So, with that being said, I want to say, have you subscribed? Are you subscribed to this channel? What are you doing with yourself? Go ahead, hit the subscription. Hit the like button, share this out. We appreciate all the help we can get. We really want this message to spread. We want people to know about this walkthrough study and know about this Cochin revelation. This is an amazing manuscript. And in fact, go check out our website, projecttruthministries.org, in which you can look up our Hebrew Matthew that we've put out. And we're going to keep putting out those chapters. And eventually, there's going to be one big, solid, finished, complete version of the Matthew. And we're going to walk you through some of the bombshells in that one. It's truly amazing. And that's what we're doing here at Project Truth Ministries. We're delivering you the truth, whatever it may be and wherever it may take us. We're going to do it for free. We're going to give it to you. So we want to say God bless. We want to encourage you to keep reading your Bibles. And I'll see you next time in chapter 18.